Hey everyone, it's Andre Luck here to share my video for this week, which is the next video in my series around sales leadership and creating winning sports sales culture, which is inspecting what you expect. So really, it's trusting your people, but verifying they're doing what you expect of them. And the first time I heard this phrase or this topic, it was my first interview I got to have as a salesperson. I was excited. I got to speak with someone who I looked up to as a mentor, still a big leader in the sports space right now, but he was looking to hire an inside sales manager. And I had a pretty good conversation, but at the end of the conversation, he's like, all right, so how do you inspect what you expect? And I had never heard the term before. And I paused for a second just to buy myself some time. And I don't even know what I said. I made up some sort of answer and just put something together. And needless to say, I didn't progress further in the conversation. But that was the first time I really thought through, like, okay, what is my style going to be like as a manager? And how do I make sure that what I expect is actually happening? So I used to think that was probably being more of a micromanager, but you definitely need to know what's going on. So one, you can hold people accountable, and if they're not, make sure that you're moving things forward. So what I'm going to talk through are three ways you can inspect what you expect and give some examples of what that looks like and some tips, and then wrap up with how this benefits you long term towards creating a winning sports sales culture. So one of the first ways you can do it is setting clear expectations up front. One of my mentors, one of my really good friends, when I was a rep and was coaching me through that conversation about my first management interview, he always talked about one of the biggest focuses as a leader is to set clear expectations and hold people accountable. Because it's really what we're there to do. Be super clear about what we're expecting and make sure that we follow through on it and make sure it aligns with overall strategy and goals for the department, the team, the organization. But one of the challenges can be when the expectations aren't clear. And one of the clients I'm working with right now, one of their leaders, is the term he uses a lot is clarity. He wants to make sure there's clarity from top to bottom on what's expected, because when you don't have clarity, it leads to issues and it leads to problems. So one example of this, or ways that it could be interpreted as unclear, not have clarity, is telling someone to increase their sales. Like, that is something we all want to do, but like, be more clear about that. I want you to increase your sales by making 3 sales worth at least $20,000 over the next quarter. That's super clear. They know exactly what it is, and you can coach and build a strategy around that. First, increased sales just means, all right, I made more sales than I made last quarter, but it's not specified, it's not clear. So it eliminates the misalignment and lack of clarity when you're specific about what that is, and that allows you to set clear expectations to move into the next point, which now you can inspect on that. Inspecting your progress without micromanaging. So that's the next tip, as relates to inspecting what you expect. Um, Understanding what's going on without necessarily micromanaging. So one of the challenges is when you do a lot of check-ins and seeing where people are at, it feels like you're micromanaging them. So how can you use data? How can you monitor progress and make sure things are progressing how you want to? One thing I was really big about as a director was the number of new opportunities we were creating and moving through the pipeline. That was a key indicator for me, because we were focused on going and finding new business. If you're getting a new opportunity created, that means you're getting new people that eventually going to turn the pipeline of revenue for us. So that was something I really focused on, and using that information was something I was always real big on. I didn't always say much, but I always knew what was going on. A lot of people caught on to that worked for me. Is like, oh, you always know what's going on. You don't always say it, but I knew how many calls people were making. I knew how many appointments people were setting. I knew, what was happening, what people were doing, weren't doing, because I, set up the reports and the data so I could see it, but also made sure I was very clear. And then when there were signals or when there were triggers that set off the red flag or the alarm, then we would have that conversation. But one way I didn't handle this well, um, and my staff in Houston, if they're listening, they'll get a good chuckle out of this. But one thing they used to always tell me was, we got irons in the fire. We got irons in the fire. And as a manager, when I hear people say that, I'm like, that means you have nothing. But you're trying to, you're a salesperson, so you're trying to sell me on the fact that you're doing more than you actually have. And one of our focuses one year was on B2B sales. And this probably is why, I'm so passionate about this as a focus for a lot of my consulting. But they're like, yeah, we're getting after it. We're hitting the businesses in the Houston market. I'm like, huh, okay, because I wasn't seeing a lot of progress happening. I wasn't seeing a lot of sales come through, but they had irons in the fire. So one meeting, I brought all the data, because I kicked off the meeting. I held it back and I said, we talked about B2B sales. Like, how's everything going? Like, oh, we got this going on, we got that, and some of it may have been true, but it wasn't enough that showed me we were really committing to it. And so I pulled up a chart. I'm like, all right, well, let's look at some of the numbers. Here's your data and your activity over the past 3 months, how many calls you made to businesses and how many calls you made to non-businesses. And it was skewed heavily to non-businesses. I want to say like 90+%, where based on what feedback they were telling me, I would have thought it was 90% the other way. Needless to say, that didn't go well. They weren't happy. I just dropped that bomb on them. So we should have had more communication and dialogue up front. But using that data to help you in a more constructive way, that could have been a very productive meeting and exercise to go through. So, when you're having these conversations with people, you want to have open-ended dialogue. You don't want to put them on a defensive, like, did you do this, or did we hit this number? But make it a conversation. I see you're at this stage, or you have this deal in the pipeline. What's the best next step? What actions have you taken? Where do you think we should go from here? Now it's a conversation between the two of you. They're participating in this. We're participating in this together. So that's a good way to make sure that you're not always checking in, but when it's necessary, you have those conversations, and they know that you support them, and that you're in the process with them. So that's a good way to balance the two. And then lastly, a tip for inspecting what you expect is balancing between giving autonomy and then holding people accountable. If you give too much freedom, then people may go off the rails. Where if you're too on top of everything and too in the weeds, you kind of kill creativity, and people lose motivation to think outside the box and do things that could be innovative, and challenge the status quo. So an example of this could be, or a way you could do this is defining your non-negotiables so that your team knows, all right, this is something that's clear and non-negotiable. And but outside of that, I can kind of get creative and try some different things and things like that. Like for me, one thing that all my staffs knew is I hated when we would qualify people without having a conversation or meeting with them. We'd have a conversation for 90 seconds, 120 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever it is, and like, oh, they weren't interested. So I didn't pitch an appointment. I didn't, dive deeper into ticket opportunities for them. I was like, well, why? Well, they just didn't seem like they're interested. Like, well, yeah, like you caught them out of the blue. Like they were at home with their kids at work, and you just called them and expected them to be ready to talk about tickets. So like that was one of my non-negotiables. It's like have the conversation, at least make the ask if they want to learn more about our options and opportunities after you have the conversation. And others have different non-negotiables, but if you make that clear, you can balance that, accountability, with some autonomy so that they can get creative outside of that. But I think if you make that clear, you set clear, you do a good job celebrating the successes and wins. When you have to coach, they don't feel like you're coming down on them. So you're finding that balance between autonomy, versus accountability, and also celebrating wins and successes versus constructive feedback and coaching opportunities and everything like that. So, a few ways that people can support you in this, because one of the challenges I've seen is a lot of sports leaders are stretched too thin. So they try and do all of this. They spend time in the sales process. They spend time coaching people, but they're also building out the reports and the dashboards so that they can check in on all these things. Like allow people to help you, whether it's, everyone has a different name for it. It could be revenue operations, business strategy, analytics. Like let them help you. They're experts in that. And that's one thing that we come in and do in our consulting, post the training to help reinforce it, is build out systems and processes so that you have all this data at your fingertips. You have the right technology that can help you track the data and see it, build out deal processes so you know exactly where deals are supposed to go through the flow. You get reports. One example I heard on a podcast recently was there's a leader that gets automated updates when a deal reaches a certain stage in the pipeline. So let's say you have like stage 3 is right before you're about to close someone. So when a deal gets to stage 3, instead of waiting for the next deal review meeting or waiting for the rep to come and update them and say, hey, we're at this stage, or I got this person, like they get an automated update, and then they grab that person and they go meet and talk with them. They're like, hey, we're at this stage, like this is a crucial part, we got to get it across the finish line. And so they meet with them and they're like, what other executives can we bring in? Who else can we have help us with this to make sure that, we're doing everything we have? Have we asked all the right questions? So I like that because you're using your support to help you And this frees you up as a leader to focus on the things that you need to focus on, which is coaching, helping with the sales process, moving the business forward, everything like that. Um, and I think another thing I just want to hit on is, as you're setting your non-negotiables and you're setting these goals and targets, like make sure that it ties into helping us hit the overall revenue goal. Sometimes we can get caught up in like philosophical beliefs of, well, just me as a leader, this is what I want my team to look like and be like. And there's something to having values and expectations, but again, sometimes it's caught up in philosophy versus things that are actually going to drive the business forward. So have reasons that help people hit their numbers, make more money, hit their goals that tie to the bigger business strategy, not, this is how I want my team to look and feel if it's not actually progressing towards the goals at the end of the day. But long-term benefits of, having this style as a leader, you create more accountability because people know that within reason, you're going to hold them accountable, but it's clear what you're holding them accountable for. So they'll have more consistency in some of their processes, drive more consistent results. One of the company I mentioned earlier that I'm consulting, I'm doing fractional leadership with them. And one of the things I do on a daily basis or weekly basis is listen to some of their phone calls because they get a lot of inbound calls and their goal is to try and convert those to sales. And whether they know in the back of their head if I'm going to listen to it or not, like they know that, all right, Andre listens to calls. I'm going to make sure I'm on point with all my calls in case he listens to this one call, so that when he reports back, I followed all the steps that we talked through and coached through. So it's that balance between knowing that we're going to hold them accountable and we're inspecting what we expect out of it, but it's not a daily basis where we're micromanaging every single phone call and everything like that. But that creates autonomy. One of the things that really drives motivation, and from the book Drive from Daniel Pink, there's three things he talks about that make people feel motivated and inspired intrinsically, and that's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, if you're giving people autonomy to be creative, but you're still also holding them accountable to what you expect, now that's where people can kind of thrive and develop because we don't, at an early part in people's career, we do have to more manage their day or actively manage what they're doing. But as they grow, and if you want your team and your department to build a culture where they're developing, like they're going to have to take on some things and make some mistakes, which is okay. But they need to have autonomy and know that you trust them to go out and try new things and grow and develop without having to watch every single thing that they do. I think about it, just being a parent, and right now, yes, like we are inspecting every single thing of what they do. But as they get older, my girls, like we'll give them more autonomy, hopefully, to do more and take on more. And we've even done that in little pieces. And it's cool to see, like, as you give them little responsibilities or a little more freedom, how they enjoy and appreciate that. So, in closing, I think the biggest thing is being authentic to yourself as a leader. If you are more of a micromanager, you skew more to that side, like lean into that. It may be difficult to find people that appreciate it, but you are going to find people, and they're going to know clearly what they're stepping into as a leader. Or if you are a little more trusting, like for me, like you earn trust until you lost it. I think you have to find that balance, but be authentic to yourself, and hopefully your leaders above you give you that freedom to lead how you are, because you're going to find the right people that are going to thrive in your culture and your environment. But I think it's clear to understand what type of leader you are, set clear expectations, and hold people accountable to it, like we said earlier. But yeah, I would love to get your feedback on this topic. Next week, I'll have my last topic that I'm going to cover as it relates to sales leadership and creating winning sales culture, which is around manager training programs. So I think some do it really well. I think there's others that there's improvements that can be made to it, because sometimes I wasn't always a fan of the concept. So I'll dive in deeper on that, and ways to do it well, ways I think I have and other teams have struggled with implementing some of those programs that lead to long-term success. So I would love to get your feedback on this video if you have thoughts on other topics I could cover. But as always, appreciate you tuning in, and I'll be back next week with another video.